Hello and welcome, my friends and viewers, to this week's episode of Legendlore, where I draw and talk about monsters, characters, gods, and other things from Dungeons & Dragons, all while giving a small but quickly digestible history about them. Together we'll go over their history within the game, how they're utilized in the modern edition, and how you guys can utilize them in your own games. Today, to jump right into it, we'll be going over one of the biggest bads of the Abyss, the two-headed beastly prince of demons, known simply as Demogorgon. Demogorgon's alignment is chaotic evil. He controls the 88th layer of the Abyss, otherwise known as the Gaping Maw. His epithets include the aforementioned Prince of Demons, the Deep Father by the Kuatoa, the Sibilant Beast by the Troglodytes, the Imprisoned One, and Siasavash by the snake-like humanoids known as Yuan-Ti. His profane symbol is a forked tail, often wrapped around a skull or a sword, as well as a pair of demonic heads, and his key worshippers include demons, a group of manta ray people whose name I find entirely impossible to pronounce, troglodytes, Kuatoa, and evil humans and humanoids. In terms of Demogorgon's appearance, he stood around 18 feet tall, with his body a mix between that of a muscular ape and a serpent. He bore two mandrill baboon heads armed with sharp teeth and a set of hands. His massive arms ended in a pair of two tentacles each, with a long forked tail at his back to match them. Interestingly enough, Demogorgon's two heads actually had their own name and personality, the left known as Amiel, who was more cunning and charismatic, and serving as the metaphorical brains of the duo, while also wishing to separate from his body in order to have his own autonomy. Meanwhile, the right one, Hathradia, was much more impulsive, vicious, and monstrous, and yearned to remain bondage to his quote-unquote brother. I imagine it's very much a "do you love me, brother" kind of situation. Due to their sharing of a single body, the two heads would constantly war and argue with one another, leading many to believe that this animosity was the only reason why Demogorgon has never been able to fully take over the Abyss, due to his sheer raw power alone. But if both heads ever managed to balance out their own natures and form a true and powerful alliance, the realms would be quite doomed. As I said, Demogorgon's abode was the 88th layer of the Abyss, known as the Gaping Maw, which consisted of a great sea of dark, briny water dotted with jagged islands and promontories. He ruled from his two towers of Absim, each one shaped like coiling serpents with skull-shaped minarets at the top. But the true length of his palace actually lay underwater, the area nearby being surrounded by mad aboleth, kraken, and other aquatic creatures. Beyond that, this layer of the Abyss was also said to hold bogs, tropical jungles, and areas of Demogorgon's malevolent experimentation, with the Demon Lord being credited with the creation of creatures such as Chimera, Ettins, Marrows, and even possibly the first known Death Knight, Saint Kargoth. In regards to the history of Demogorgon, there are several different stories about his origin, some claiming that he was the first demon ever born of mortals' primordial fears and hatred, while others believe him to actually be a primordial who first set foot into the Abyss, becoming tainted and twisted by its essence. Nevertheless, Demogorgon was involved in several shifts of power within the Abyss, such as an alliance with Orcus and Baphomet to dethrone Abaxob, the first Prince of Demons, and his resurgence to claim that title upon the defeat of the Queen of Chaos, snatching it right out of both Grotzt and Orcus's hands. This is actually said to be because he had slain and drained the powers of several demon lords using his tail, forcing others to kneel before the new Prince of Demons. Beyond that, Demogorgon was also known to have been confronted by the legendary drow hero Drizzt Do'Urden, who fought against Demogorgon when he escaped the Abyss as a result of a drow sorcerer's spell gone awry. It took Drizzt allying with a Mind Flayer hive to actually be able to stop him. Now, in terms of Demogorgon's true abilities, he was actually known to prefer avoiding direct conflict, using his powerful magic to instead aid his servants in accomplishing his goals. But if he was ever to deal with creatures directly, Demogorgon was known to hypnotize with a gaze or cause others to lose their minds to insanity upon looking at him, which I can actually imagine would depend largely on which head you're looking at. If you're meaning the left's gaze, the hypnosis makes more sense given his cunning and charismatic nature, but if you're meaning the right's, its destructive and ravenous personality matches well with its gaze frying a person's mind. As I said before, Demogorgon's tail could sap life from those caught with it, and his tentacles could cause the flesh of those they touched to wither and slop off, almost as if dealing some kind of flesh-eating disease similar to aboleth. Beyond that, Demogorgon had a distinct resilience against magic, especially enchantment magic due to his two heads and thus two different minds. He was also an accomplished spellcaster in his own right, wielding spells such as Detect and Dispel Magic, Fear, Feeble Mind, Major Image, Project Image, and Telekinesis. On top of that, Demogorgon is one of the few demons capable of leaving the Abyss via plane shift, although he becomes significantly weaker while he is in the material plane. In terms of his relationships, Demogorgon, being the Prince of Demons, has no shortage of enemies amongst gods, other demon lords, and devils, with the primary sources of his disdain being the fellow demon lords Grotst, Orcus, and Fraz Urblu. On the flip side, his allies included the daemon Oberith Lord Dagon, who often served as an advisor, and Zuktmoy, the demon of fungi, who would often trade in fungal growths and demonic fauna with him. Demogorgon was also known to have a brother in the demon lord Mandrillagon. Demogorgon also has romantic interests, if you could believe it, such as the succubus Shamiamore and the succubus queen Malcanthid, the former being imprisoned in the Wells of Darkness for her manipulations of him toward her benefit. Now, regarding Demogorgon's clergy and worship, his cults were relatively smaller in comparison to other deities and fellow demon lords. As previously said, he was distinctly worshipped by a sentient manta ray race, I believe known as Itztichils. I believe I'm entirely bastardizing that, along with Kuatoa, troglodytes, and possibly even his namesake of Gorgons. As reflective of his heads, his temples were often split in two, with each sides representing one of the two heads and their ideologies. His cult particularly prospered during times of chaos, often seen stoking the fires of destruction and adding to the madness that unfolds. They would also make use of the generated chaotic energy in an attempt to summon an avatar of Demogorgon himself, which, as I said, was smaller and not as powerful as his true form, and always suffered from one head maintaining greater control over the other. If Amael held control, the avatar of Demogorgon would be more focused on cunning, deception, and guiding his cult towards separating the two. If Hethradia held control, the avatar concerned itself only with causing as much terror, horror, and destruction as it could, all while being keen on destroying any research or progress that Amael may have made towards splitting them apart. I could also imagine that due to their division within the temples, when an avatar of Demogorgon was summoned, the side whose head held less sway would often work in secret against the other, all in service towards their own head's agenda. Perhaps during a campaign, the PCs could be approached by one half of Demogorgon's cult for aid, Amael's side wishing to stop Hadrathia's rampant destruction from completely annihilating the world, or Hadrathia's side wishing to stop Demogorgon's separating, which would allow Amael to subject the world to a whole new kind of tyranny without his brother's interference. Now, when it comes to running Demogorgon at the table, my two biggest inspirations come from the monster known as the Darkness from the game series of the same name, and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. When running my game, I prefer to use the origin of Demogorgon being the first ever demon to ever exist, as it gives him this primal power and haunting presence even amongst other demons. Furthermore, I like to use this origin because, in my interpretation of Demogorgon, his two heads reflect the growing complexities of mortals and their fears. Hadrathia would have emerged as the starting head, born of the ancient and vicious fears of old, undeveloped mortal kind. Think of the things that caveman and primal humans would be scared of, wild animals, other tribes, and the dangers of nature. With that in mind, Amael's appearance can represent mortals and their growing intelligence, their thoughts and fears becoming more sophisticated and esoteric, such as being afraid of manipulation, betrayal, heartbreak, and deception. This is why both heads end up warring against one another, because mortals and their primal nature still remains deep in their heart, but their growing knowledge and understanding of the world is beginning to supplant and layer over that primal base. Mortals can wish to separate from their baser instincts in the same way that the intelligent Amael wants to separate from the primal Hadrathia. In the event that Demogorgon's aspect is ever summoned to the material plane, and he ends up favoring his Amael aspect over his Hadrathia aspect, I love having Demogorgon being the one to lead his cult directly, focusing on cultivating a ritual that would finally allow him to split apart, the primal and intelligent halves becoming their own wholly separate entities. Beyond that, I also like to have Demogorgon make all demons that serve him bear two heads as a sort of mark of symbolism of ownership. I meant to mention this in my previous videos, but demon lords in my game mark the demons that they serve with aspects of themselves. Orcus marks his demons with skeletal or undead attributes, Grotz makes all of his relentlessly attractive, and so on and so forth. I feel that it helps differentiate between which demons serve which demon lord on the battlefield or in the abyss. Now, with all that out of the way, here are a couple of classes and subclasses that can match for Demogorgon-aligned PCs and NPCs for Dungeon Masters. For Artificers, the Armorer can forge a living suit of armor modeled after Demogorgon's reptilian hide and tendrils, but wearing such a visage can cause them to hear the conflicted strategies of their heads in battle. The Artillerist can create a pair of eldritch cannons shaped like Demogorgon's heads, and the Battlesmith can build a steel defender resembling a two-headed ape lizard, almost kind of acting as a lesser idol to Demogorgon that perhaps the Demon Lord can inhabit over time. For barbarians, the ancestral guardian can be haunted by visions of a two-headed demonic spirit, claiming Demogorgon has corrupted the bloodline, which could be ideal for a tiefling PC. Beast barbarians can mutate during their rage, sprouting tentacles or tusks as a sign of Demogorgon's blessing, quote-unquote. While magic barbarians can flavor their rage's magical aspects to originate from abyssal energy. A World Tree barbarian can have the job of corrupting the World Tree by wielding Demogorgon's destructive influence to infest it from within. And the Wild Heart Berserker and Zealot barbarians can all be simple fanatical cultists of Demogorgon, whose rage emulates the head of Hadrathia. For bards, those of the College of Dance and Swords can fight in a wild, unpredictable style meant to mimic the chaos of Hadrathia, and the College of Tragedy can be obsessed with the tragic relationship between Demogorgon's two heads. For clerics, the Arcana and Knowledge cleric can call upon Amael's cunning and intellectual nature. War, Tempest, and Death could of course reflect Hadrathia's destructive nature as well. And trickery clerics can use Invoke Duplicity and Illusion spells to be reflective of Demogorgon's dual and deceptive nature. For druids, those from the Circle of Blighted, Spores, and Wildfire can reflect Hadrathia's destructive nature as previously stated, be it slow and encroaching for the Blighted and Spores, or ravenous and devouring like the Wildfire. For fighters, the Echo Knight can actually have their echoes argue in the middle of battle and maybe even wield distinct personalities reflecting Demogorgon's dual-headed nature, and the Rune and Eldritch Knight can flavor their spells in runic usage as being abyssal in origin. For monks, the astral self can manifest their astral energy as Demogorgon's monstrous visage via in the form of tentacles and such. The Drunken Master can stagger like a madman, similar to the Dance and Swords bards. The Warrior of the Elements can channel the destructive, chaotic elements of the abyss, especially if you go with Demogorgon's origins as a primordial. And finally, the Shadow can serve as a cult assassin, striking from the shadows in emulation of Emiel's cunning and deceptive nature. For paladins, oaths to the crown, conquest, and devotion can all worship Demogorgon's rank as the Prince of Demons. The Oathbreaker can be a nihilistic ex-paladin who kneels before Demogorgon's vicious philosophy. And of course, the Open Sea works very well given Demogorgon's status as a Lord of Oceans and his Abyssal Layers theme of sea creatures and aquatic area. For rangers, a Beastmaster Ranger's animal companion can be a baboon ape or tentacled monstrosities that emerge from the abyss, and the Gloomstalker could be a tiefling who originates from the deepest abyssal jungles of Demogorgon's plane. For rogues, the Arcane Trickster can wield abyssal magic, and the Mastermind can be a manipulator who draws upon Amael's cunning nature. For sorcerers, the Aberrant and Storm Sorcery bloodlines can be attached to Demogorgon's aquatic and eldritch influence. The Wild Magic, Shadow, and Divine Soul Sorcerer, specifically the evil one for Divine Soul, can all be tainted with a spark of Demogorgon's abyssal divinity in various ways. Chaos for Wild Magic, Corruption for Shadow, and Evil for Evil. Go figure. And then of course there's the Rune Child, whose body can be etched with abyssal runes, glowing when Demogorgon's presence is near. For warlocks, the Great Old One and the Fathomless once again draw power upon Demogorgon's oceanic depths, and can even channel energy directly from his abyssal plane, similar to the Aberrant Soul Sorcerer or the Tempest Cleric. And then of course there's the Fiend Patron, which is the obvious pick for being a direct servant of Demogorgon. And finally, for wizards, the Conjuration School can allow you to summon abyssal demons and emissaries of Demogorgon, and the Evoker and War Magic schools can channel the destructive energy in homage to Demogorgon's raw, chaotic power. With all that out of the way, here are a couple of magic items that I personally believe match Demogorgon very beautifully, and can be given as loot upon defeating Demogorgon cults, or can even be given as rewards for taking on adventures and missions from said cults. And finally, for our homebrew magic item this evening, we have the Crowns of the Serpent, which is a pair of tiaras that can be worn and attuned to by two different people at once, but can also be combined to become a true crown for one person to wear. Each side of the crown is shaped like a serpent and its head, and when combined, can become twisted and intertwined into a perfectly symmetrical form. The first half grants the wearer the ability to breathe underwater, and advantage on all saving throws made with either intelligence, wisdom, or charisma, which is chosen upon attuning to this item. The second half grants the wearer a swim speed equal to their movement speed, and advantage on either strength, dexterity, or constitution saving throws, choosing one upon attunement. However, when combined together, the wearer gains all of the benefits listed above, and once per long rest, they can cast the spell Confusion, requiring no somatic or verbal or material components with a DC of 20. However, when cast this way using this item, the wearer must also roll a saving throw to avoid suffering the very same effect of the spell Confusion. I've included the item stock block in the description below, and with that, that's our coverage of the Prince of Demons, Demogorgon, everybody. I want to thank all of you guys for watching and sticking with me despite the long hiatus. I did not expect it to be this long, and I have been tremendously busy. But if you guys want a chance to vote on the next video and see progress as they come along, please check out the community tab and press the little bell icon to be notified of future videos. Also, like, share, comment, and subscribe as well. It's always appreciated. And players, please tell me how you guys have encountered Demogorgon in your individual games, and DMs, tell me how you guys like to interpret Demogorgon and how you have run him for your adventures and for your players. And also let me know what you guys would like to see in upcoming videos. But until then, I'll see you guys next time.